Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Gulsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science. Will,
Marcus.
we are getting close to 100.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
I can't believe it. I don't know if I've ever stuck to something this long.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Well, my job, I've stuck to my job that long. I've shown up more than 100 days, but
there you go. But they're paying you to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Nobody's paying us to be here.
Right. That's right. So I feel like we need to do something special.
Yeah. So we've talked about some ideas, and I wanted to take a moment to also extend appreciation to our listeners. We've had a phenomenal run of this, and we're still here because of the feedback that we get. People are enjoying it, and they commonly tell us that.
Yeah, if they weren't telling us that they're listening and actually applying the information, then we would have shut it down a long time ago.
Yeah, after probably the first 12 episodes we had in the pocket.
Yeah.
But what happened is we got kind of overwhelmed with the support and, people using it on their farms. I mean, how many times have we heard that story?
A lot.
Just over and over, all over the range of turkeys. So,
and over 1 million acres impacted.
Yeah, millions of acres impacted. So that's pretty incredible, and we want to keep going. So we appreciate everybody doing that. But we wanted to do something special for 100.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going to tell you about right here. So after getting feedback from the audience and our own discussions, what we decided to do was to get a customized pot call that will be a wild turkey science pot call, and we're both going to sign it.
Yeah. And it's a nice call too. So, I mean, you could use it as a decorative piece, or you could actually scratch it up and call on it if you want to.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be a Woodhaven glass pot call, which I have a couple of those, and they're fine calls.
Mighty fine calls. I was just thinking about that when you said it. Would you rather somebody, decorate with it and have it up on the shelf? Or would you rather them scratch it up and take a picture of a big old tom they killed with it?
Definitely hunt with it.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's up to them. So
Yeah.
Are we gonna sign it, or is Craig gonna sign it?
I think we ought to have Charlotte sign it. I mean, she's the one that's made us sound listenable. Certainly hasn't been us.
We looked into having, Dr. Craig Harper sign it, but the logistics were too complicated, so sorry, it's just going to be us.
Yeah. We tried to see if we could get somebody famous to sign it on our behalf, but it didn't work out.
Well, if they wanted to hear from somebody famous, they wouldn't be listening to us anyway.
Yeah. Maybe we're just like the interim.
There you go.
Between the famous hosts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what do they need to do to have a chance at this call?
Well, we kicked around several ideas, and I can't remember exactly where we landed. We talked about, reviews, and then we moved over to YouTube comments, I think was the last idea, because it seems like we're getting a lot more engagement and reaching more people over there as that audience grows too.
Yeah, and I think it also does another thing. It it kind of rewards the people that have been here with us the longest by letting them comment, and I'm sure a lot of those folks have already reviewed the podcast, but we have a bunch of people probably that have reviewed it and have moved on since.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to kind of narrow it down to our tried and true listeners. And, I think that is the best idea that we came up with. Let's, have people comment on this video, and then we'll announce who the winner is on episode 100.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Pretty cool. So this one will drop. You'll have some time to do it. Also, we will link the video if you're listening through the podcast app of your choice. We'll link in the show notes the video on YouTube so that you don't have to go look for it if you don't listen that way. But that's a way, that we could give everybody the opportunity to chime in. And yeah, we'll pick from those folks who gets number 100, the special call.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I can't believe we're already there.
Yeah. Well, here's to 100 more.
Yeah. So if you want a chance at it, make sure you leave us a comment on this video, and we will draw it on number 100 and let everybody know who that is. And, if you want to take that opportunity to leave us a question you'd want answered or something like that.
Or a suggestion or...
Yeah, suggestions, testimonial.
Constructive criticism.
Yeah, as long as, we're criticized plenty, and when it's constructive, it's really helpful.
Right.
But the problem is it's often not constructive.
So let's turn those YouTube comments around into something constructive.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of have a, discussion forum, even amongst the listeners. So,
absolutely.
All right. You ready to move on to the episode?
Let's do it.
You still got the Thor hammer.
Yeah.
I wonder, what, we should sign that and give it away for the 100th.
This is my fidget spinner.
Oh man. So I kind of had an idea.
Okay.
We talked about recently, we're our audience is growing. It's not just through the podcast platform. Also, we're developing a listenership on YouTube. And I am really curious.
Is that a listenership or is that a viewership?
Well, that's what I was curious about. I'm curious, are they watching us or are they listening to it like through the, their Bluetooth in their truck or what? What are they doing? So leave us a comment, but, it dawned on us, we wanted to bring in that audience to some of the giveaways because some folks have asked about that. And we value all of the audience, not just on the podcast platform. So we asked Charlotte, if
Speak
if she
for
could
yourself. I discriminate against YouTubers.
We asked Charlotte if she could go, grab us one because we're asking her to do that. And then she made it clear to us that we needed to start answering questions from the YouTube audience.
Yeah.
So what we thought we would do is
it would be nice to go answer them in the comments, but it's just not doable.
Yeah, the problem is we're getting comments in so many places that they kind of fall through, and that one I don't even think you have access to do that.
Yeah, it would just be like what? It would just be like my normal YouTube handle, and people would be like, "Who is this guy coming in trying to act like he knows everything?"
Yeah, so it's just difficult for us to keep up. But a lot of our listeners probably heard that we are bringing on another communications person to try to help with capacity because we're getting too big for our britches. Basically, is what's happening. So we want to continue to grow and to bring more content to everybody and be more responsive, while we do it. So anyway, I thought we should invite Charlotte on to share some of those questions, and let's just have a Q&A session from YouTube.
Yeah, and also give the audience an opportunity to hear from Charlotte.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And the YouTube audience will appreciate that, and we'll see Charlotte on here, and maybe we can get her to say thank you to them.
So how do we get her here? Do I just have to yell loud or click my heels?
Charlotte! Get in here!
Oh, hey, Charlotte. What's Charlotte doing here?
Hey, guys.
Hey,
So
Charlotte.
good to join you.
I never expected Charlotte to be here.
Yeah.
Surprise.
I feel like I should provide some context.
So that people fully understand how incompetent we are?
Well, we might leave some of those parts out,
Okay,
but they already know. Will.
they do.
They need not any more direction. Recently, we were talking about including our YouTube audience on the giveaways. And when we talked about that with Charlotte, she pointed out to us that we also needed to answer a bunch of questions there, and we've been neglecting our audience, on YouTube. So we don't want to give the impression that we don't value everyone, all of our audience. So we thought it'd be a good idea to invite Charlotte on. What you all don't know is that we already did this one time, and we recorded me and Will with Charlotte in the room, and everybody out there can't see her or hear her. So we're going to try that again, Charlotte.
That version was
realize
the best version. I mean, it would have propelled us to the top of the Apple charts.
Oh my gosh!
But we lost it. So
yeah, we would have gotten like 1 million comments, and our YouTube channel would have blown up, and we would have probably launched it. Wild Turkey Science 2.
Yeah.
It would have been like a second Wild Turkey Science podcast.
Yeah. I mean,
man.
It's amazing
crazy.
that this mom and pop operation has made it this far.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you noticed before we got into any questions. So for the record out there, Charlotte is going to reveal these questions to us, and we have no idea. It's like we're hearing them for the first time and responding to them on the air.
Which will likely be obvious.
Yeah, and I think people appreciate that. Like, this is our candid response to what people have to say.
Yeah. All right.
So, Charlotte, I did want to point out we also had the idea that you could record an episode and then we would do the editing, but Will thought maybe you two could do the episode and then I do the editing, and we'll kind of see who does better at what. Maybe it's a new trend we should go with. I think, Will did say early on that he was bringing the talent, so I'm sort of expendable at this point.
Do I get to see the episode and add any finishing touches after your first draft?
No. If we get 150 comments on this episode, we will do that.
No. No.
Please. Hold your comments, folks.
From different people.
I can tell you exactly how it's going to be produced if I have to produce it. I'm going to drag that little file, whatever you give me, in its raw format, and it's going to go right onto Libsyn.
Shout out Libsyn.
I think is that where it goes? I don't know. Can you drag and drop?
Oh, we didn't say we were going to upload it. We're just doing the editing.
Okay.
So I still have some management oversight.
Do you know how many gobbles are going to be in that thing?
That's what I'm asking for, guys.
Well, in the previous version of this one, we did have a couple of gobbles for you while we were waiting on you.
We did.
But unfortunately, we failed to record that one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what I decide to do with the first 10 minutes of the first episode and the last 10 of it.
Oh.
You guys are just sandwiched talking to a ghost. Shout out to Will for recognizing the technical mistake before we jump fully into this episode. Way to bring the talent on the tech side, Will.
That was a leap beyond me.
At least I'm good.
And yet
for
we're
something.
having you edit the episode afterwards.
No,
something's not adding up.
Our listeners have to vote for that. Well, the reality is, like, we want the YouTube channel to grow, and it's starting to become a significant portion of the listenership, and we want to continue to grow there as well. And I think when we get more capacity, we're going to start putting more effort into, other things that we just don't have the capacity to do now to help facilitate that.
Like hair and makeup for YouTube videos.
That's not what I was thinking about. But if that's what you would like, I mean, you did get the hammer, so you're going all out with the props here.
What about wardrobe too? Can I get somebody to buy me clothes?
we might could arrange something, but yeah. So when folks are watching these and commenting, it's helping the algorithm push it out to more people and helping us grow ultimately. So drop us a comment. We appreciate that. So what we're really here for was to have Charlotte bring us some questions so that we can candidly answer them on the air.
So these are all questions. Are there any comments too, or
we have some comments?
Criticisms?
See, this is where the criticisms are, or is on YouTube.
Because I kind of want you to read.
Funny
criticisms of us.
Ooh, I didn't specifically pull those out.
We can do that in another. We can do that in another one.
Okay, because there were some that I went by that I was like, "Ooh, that's harsh."
They weren't funny. They were just critiques.
They were just
mean.
Just mean. But that's social media for you.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of them are not constructive.
Yeah. All right. There's one that I'll start off with. Let's see. Okay. So we actually have quite a couple comments about like Midwest habitat management. This guy, Charlie Merrill, well, I guess this technically isn't like a technical question, but Charlie Merrill 8687 on our episode 93, Help Us Help You, says, "Hey guys, what do you think about bringing Mr. Luke Garver, Illinois wild turkey manager, on to address some of the issues Illinois is having? That would bring in a lot of views. A lot of people really want to know what's going on in Illinois."
That is a great idea, and I did get the contact information for Luke already.
There you go.
Nice. I see.
So is he like the turkey program coordinator for the state of Illinois?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have been reaching out to various states because we want to continue, that we haven't done any in a while, any state updates, and I wanted to do some out in the Midwest if we could, because we have a lot of listeners out there, and folks want to know what's going on. So that was one that I looked for the contact on. And Luke, if you're listening by chance, we'd love to have you on the show.
I thought you were going to ask him to send your availability.
That would have been better.
No.
Will you be available next Tuesday by chance?
All right. What else you got, Charlotte?
All right. Crenshaw Mafia 7 on episode 78, If Not the Season, What's the Reason, asks, "I have property and I raise heritage turkeys. What or who would I need to contact to find out if I could help hatch wild turkeys for release, or even use my property for release efforts? I'm in South Alabama." Shout out, Will. My farm. He didn't say that. I said, "I'm in South Alabama." But see, I should not be a host of this podcast.
You're doing great.
Thanks. My farm's in Central Alabama. Who would I need to contact to find out this information? Will, you should have that number right off the top of your head, I imagine.
Well,
memorized.
Yeah, we appreciate the question. We're not releasing any pen-raised turkeys anymore because pen-raised turkeys don't survive, is what we found out.
Yeah, that was decades of efforts during the early restocking. That was tried, and various strategies were implemented, and they just would not take.
Yeah, And that's a good question too, I think, because it gives us the opportunity to talk about, it was the advent of the aerial net, right? The cannon net and the rocket
Mm-hmm.
net, that really revolutionized turkey restocking because it allowed biologists to capture large numbers of wild birds and then translocate those to areas that needed to be restocked. And so that's the model we've been using for restocking for decades now, because we found out that those pin-reared birds just don't live once you release them.
Yeah, and one thing, Charlotte, it might be really interesting for you to link in our show notes for this one.
Mm-hmm.
We have the National Wild Turkey Symposium, the original, the first one. This
Yeah.
was a prime topic of discussion between all the biologists, and they were trying to figure out what they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to kind of see the history on it, I think we talked about on one of the history episodes recently, but it was in that reading where the biologists were really talking about it decades ago, in the
Mm-hmm.
50s.
Yep.
Yeah, we can definitely get that linked.
Yeah, that
Those are
documentary.
cool to go back through.
That documentary that Mossy Oak produced last spring talks a lot about it too.
Yeah.
That
Yep,
one that's
another
available
good
on
place.
YouTube, Colonel and the Fox.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good question.
Okay. Joseph Sioni, 5293, on episode 60, Prioritizing Management Efforts, says good information about the extra 30 feet on either side of his access roads. What vegetation fills those side strips to make it good brooding type? Is it native vegetation or planted? Thanks.
Good question.
Very good. So you're talking about daylighting the roads, and I definitely recommend that practice often because it is a great way to get more sunlight on the ground and promote brooding cover throughout your property and it be connected by design. I think that's excellent. From my perspective, we are thinking mostly about managing native vegetation in that area. So you're trying to just have early successional plants. Many of the forbs that we talk about all the time, your ragweeds and bonesets and goldenrods and, dozens and dozens of other species
Partridge
that might
peas and lespedezas and crotons and so on and so forth.
Yep. So that is what what we would recommend that you do with a large portion of it. That does not mean that you can't take some parts of it and plant it, especially doing that strategically to attract animals to a place where they're more huntable. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the same way that I think about it, and there's lots of ways that you could get creative with it. So one way that you could manage those roadsides is by winter disking. Just turning up the soil a little bit. From basically any time between killing frosts, right? So you want to do it after you've had a killing frost, and then you don't want to do it, once things start greening up. That's kind of your window. And if you find that to maintain the right structure on your property and the right species composition as well, you may need to disc like every other year or something like that. So you could do like one side of the road one year, one side the next, or you can alternate back and forth. There's lots of options to get creative there too.
Yeah, and I will add a couple of things to that. I tend to prefer, if you can, to have the road that you're going to travel up and down on one side and have most of your opening on the other.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned that in another recent episode.
It's not the only way to do it,
yeah.
But I like that. It simplifies the management in some ways. Another thing I have seen a few landowners do this, and they seem to like it a lot, is to burn the early succession as part of the stand that's adjacent.
Right.
And then you have this transition, especially if you have some edge feathering as part of it as well. The fire interacting with the gradient and sunlight develops a diversity of structure that is high quality, and putting that high quality structure for different biological reasons like nesting and brooding cover directly together, and it's connected.
That's a
So
good point, because like in the highest sunlight areas, you're probably going to have grass, and as you get a little bit lower, it'll transition to forbs, and a little bit lower, it's probably going to be like mostly like forbs and woody plants mixed together.
yeah, as you start to decrease that sunlight penetration, you sort of like what we've talked about with the variable retention approach in your forestry program and your woods. The diversity in sunlight interacting with fire produces a really high quality structure, composition across the stand. So you can create that deliberately through utilizing those practices together. So another key thing for me is the road is by design access, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's making it easier for you to get to where you're trying to apply treatments. And, in many cases with a practice like this, if you have some problematic plants, you can just drive the ATV or the tractor right down the road and spray things in your early succession all along it. Another good one.
Perfect.
I like how you're going through, like we're kind of delinquent if we're going all the way back to the 60s in the episodes.
Yeah, I figured we'd hop around.
We're really delinquent.
So this one is from, looks like a random user UG7BQ5IF9F, from our episode 55, Findings from Alabama and Upcoming Research.
If they know who you're talking about, I'm impressed. Like they remember their own account.
Yeah. They'd have to hit the save login to get to their account. They say, I appreciate you guys and what you're doing with your videos. I'm curious about your thoughts on the fertility of bearded hens. Property which I hunt seems to have a much higher percentage of bearded hens than a normal population. I've taken 3 of them over the years fall hunting the property. Correction, one of them was a spring hunt. Anyways, always wondered about whether or not removing those hens really affects the population.
I think I led on the last one, Will, but I'm happy to lead on this one.
I didn't know you did. I am not aware of any evidence that shows that fecundity differs between bearded and non-bearded hens.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not aware of any data point that would suggest they're more or less capable than any other hen in the population. In other words, being bearded is sort of random with respect to their reproductive capability. But on the other side, we do know that hen survival is the most important metric in terms of population trajectory. And while in the majority of states, especially outside of the Northeast, where it's a really big part of the culture, and maybe a couple of other places, or in the history, of tradition of hunting for turkeys, it's at the state level, we harvest very few hens in most states.
Mm-hmm.
And at that level, probably doesn't make a big difference. It's just such a small proportion of the population. But in a local scale, if you think about your own population, a 10% or more harvest rate of hens probably decrease in productivity noticeably. So it's definitely something to consider. At the local scale, you could certainly affect them by removing a few if it's higher proportion. And that's kind of the general rule of thumb for folks out there based on the early literature in the 80s and 90s. That was what was recommended, that is, if we stay under 10% harvest, it's not having dramatic effects. Although that was in a different time with a different level of production. The nesting success and brooding success was a little bit higher back then, and the hen survival as well. So, which we'll talk about in more detail in an upcoming episode. We have some stuff we're working on related to that.
All right, speaking of upcoming episodes, I'm going to jump to our previous one on episode 49, Managing Hardwoods, Oak Biology, because we're going to be having an oak episode coming up before too long. This person asked 2 questions. Their username is oldplace-xc7pv. They say, I've got a lot of hickory on ridges in Clay County, Florida. Thinking about ridding them with a mazapir and planting white oaks. Any suggestions? And then right below that, they said, wonder if chestnuts would do well in Clay County, Florida. Are they cyclical like oaks? Acorn crop this year is weak. All caps.
That's a lot to take on.
Yeah, it's a little difficult with a little more context to answer the hickory question, but I can talk about the chestnut for a minute, and then we can bounce around the hickory question. But there's a, I forgot where, maybe you can find it, Charlotte, or folks can Google it out there and try to find it, but there's a map of the historical distribution of chestnut, and I cannot remember if any of that extended into North Florida and some of the ridges over in the Panhandle.
I know that it does not include portions of South Alabama, so I would suspect that it may not even go down there.
I think it may, though, on that particular portion, but I don't remember.
Okay.
But I've tinkered around with chestnuts a good bit, and the things I guess that I've learned about them, they are pretty hardy, relatively easy to grow and transplant. So if you plant them on the property, and it's suitable for them, it's probably fine. And there are places that are growing and planting chestnuts in Florida. I do know that. I just don't know if that's in the historical range where you're at. So they probably can do well, and in terms of the masting, they tend to be much more consistent than white oak or white oaks in general. So where you have this cyclical pattern we talked about with white oaks, and you kind of have a boom or bust cycle, and that often goes on a 3 to 5 year interval where you generally have a really big boom and a couple of busts in that cycle, and then some average years. The that variation should be less variable for chestnuts. You have a more consistent mass crop, but you also don't generally have those super crops in given years either. What about the hickories?
As far as the hickories go, I mean, the first thing, I guess I would ask, like, what is he trying to accomplish there, right?
Yeah,
It
and
sounds
then
like
what
what
is
he's
the
trying.
context? Is it a stand dominated by hickory, or are we
Yeah,
talking about the hickories that are mixed in an oak stand?
right. Yeah, that wasn't clear either, and I'm not sure. It sounds like, based on his comment, that he was going to come back and plant oaks. Isn't that what he said? If he got rid of the hickories, he's going to come back and plant oaks. That his goal there is to try to increase acorn production on the site.
White
Um,
oaks, yeah.
yeah, and first of all, what comes to mind is if there are any oaks that are currently on the site, you can help those oaks become more productive by killing the trees around it that are preventing its crown from expanding out. So if you get under an oak in that area that you're talking about, and you look up, and the canopies generally won't touch, but if you can see that it's close to adjacent canopies, if you kill those trees, especially if they're relatively low value to wildlife species, you'll allow that crown to expand and you'll increase acorn production that way.
Mm-hmm.
Another option he could consider, it just depends on, if there's acorn production elsewhere on the property, he may not really even need to increase it,
Yeah, or even in neighboring properties.
Right. But another option would be is if you did want to start over, you could even look into, and I don't know like what acreage we're talking about or anything like that, but you could look into a commercial timber harvest and just have them come clear cut it. And if you want to plant back white oaks, you could plant back white oaks behind the clear cut.
Yeah.
Another option is go into that area, do the FSI that I talked about. So kill a bunch of those hickories. And if you don't have good oak representation in that stand, you in some of those gaps that you create when you kill the hickories, that's where you can plant your white oaks. And the benefit of that is, assuming that this is a mature hardwood forest, you're still retaining some mass production, you're still maintaining roost sites, you're not going to have to go through that phase of years where if you clear cut it, it's going to become unusable by turkeys until those trees, get a
Mm-hmm.
little bit taller and they put
Yeah,
some shade on the ground and they thin out that vegetation.
yeah, and that could
So,
be quite a long time.
yeah, it can be quite a long time. By comparison, if you're planting white oaks in canopy gaps that you've created, um, you've still accomplished the objective of planting your white oaks, but those little patches that you've created can be managed with fire to meet a variety of needs. So you can burn them more
Mm-hmm.
often to maintain them as brooding cover, or you could, you could very easily rake out around your oak trees, so you don't have to worry about burning those when they're young. Um, or burn it a little bit less often and let those little patches become nesting cover. So there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of options that you could play with there.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. All right, we're going to jump to removing fescue and promoting native species. This was a shorts video that we put out through our YouTube channel. The person who commented is R. Chad Ayers, and they say, what if the field of fescue was created by seeding directly on top of filled dirt from gravel road construction? There is not much native seed in the seed bank. What do you suggest then? How deep to disc? I assume disc after fire? ? Great info. Thanks.
You want me to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I have some experience in different situations where they have a bunch of spoils that from something
Mhm.
where that's the base soil, and unfortunately in Florida and the experience that I've had with that, those things are covered up with Kogon grass usually.
I've seen some of them covered with Sericea lespedeza too.
Yeah, that up in the mid-south is where I've seen that more. But you usually have some problems to deal with in that situation, so it can be challenging. I guess in terms of managing the native seed bank, a lot of the practices that we have talked about are still viable, but the seed, like you suggested, are having to come from elsewhere, which I've done a fair amount of work showing that their seeds are remarkably good at getting to those areas. But so in other words, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the seed bank to respond. It may come with birds or wind, but usually in that situation, when you initially implement those kinds of practices, what you get is not desirable. I would say that that's overwhelmingly the case in my experience.
Yeah. The other place that you sometimes see that too is on former ag fields that have had a long history of herbicide use.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing I have been wanting to bring up, there are good plantings that are native ground cover plantings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to recommend that is never an option or
Right.
never a good option or the
Right.
best option, because I think sometimes it is, and it depends on what your objective is. But in some circumstances like that, bringing plant material in, may be warranted to
Agreed.
achieve your objective.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not like just, diametrically opposed to planting. It's just, I mean, we just did a food plot episode, right?
Yeah.
It's just a lot of times I think people turn to planting first because it's what they're most familiar with,
Yeah.
right? But we try to show them that they don't always have to plant it.
Yeah, in most cases, I would say you don't to achieve what their objective is.
And they're saving money while doing it too.
But if your objective is to restore native ground cover to include a bunch of rare plant species, nothing wrong with that objective, but you're probably going to have to plant in a lot of situations to accomplish that objective. If you're wanting high quality brooding cover, a lot of those plants may not matter.
Yeah.
To it. You can achieve that with some of the old field weedy plants like ragweed and partridge pea and those things that that we recommend all the time. You can get that with soil disturbance and fire often. So.
And my prediction would be that if you did start cultivating those sites and then you brought in some native forb and grass seeds, that once you start cultivating that I imagine that your seed dispersers are going to be drawn to that, and then they're going to
Yep.
bring in more seed from a greater diversity of plants.
Yeah, that is exactly what our data have shown, and we're working on publishing it right now. Is exactly that is sort of like this positive feedback where diversity begets diversity. And the other thing I did want to point out, in a couple of these places like this that I have experience with, we have done soil tests, and they are remarkably acidic. And I don't know if that's what you'd be finding in this particular situation, but I do want to plug that, get some soil tests and see what you're dealing with, because it may be so out of whack that the reason you get a bunch of things you don't like are because they're the only ones that can tolerate the extreme soil infertility.
Yeah, and spoils are always a little bit different depending on where they, came from or were dredged or dug or whatever. But one thing I will add is, you're going to want to add, you're going to want to build up the organic material in that soil. I imagine it's very low in that currently, and there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, we had a couple episodes recently on regenerative ag, and that's kind of one of the key
elements of it,
objectives, right? Of using that technique. So that's there for you. But there's also just like species that you can choose to plant, like buckwheat, for example, is one that comes to mind that's a great soil builder. But without knowing, the texture and the fertility of his specific situation, I can't say, how that would perform. But good stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a different kind of challenge, but you can still get there.
I've got an exciting announcement today from our friends at Grounded Brand. They have decided to offer a 10% discount to Wild Turkey Science listeners. So if you go to groundedbrand.com, you can choose from a variety of apparel and turkey hunting gear that they have available. It's really nice looking stuff. And just enter the code Turkey Science, all one word, at checkout, and you'll get 10% off.
All right, I'll give you a low-hanging fruit.
She's smirking, Marcus. I don't know what I don't know what to think.
Is it a
This
joke?
is gonna be. No.
No, was that the question? What is a low-hanging fruit?
That's what kind of forb produces a low-hanging fruit? All right. Show Me the Heartland commented on episode 66, Habitat Management equals Predator Management. Wow, extremely interesting. This is huge. I could never come close to making those kinds of impacts on predators by hunting and trapping. Is there any speculation as to why burning makes such an impact on predator use?
Takes away their habitat.
Yep. I think that there's probably a combination of things going on related to vegetation structure that probably makes it more difficult for them to catch food, even though sometimes it may be more abundant there.
Yeah.
But in other cases, like Will talked about on a previous episode, it may be removing some of the components related to food.
Yeah, I spent, 30, 45 minutes one day just bouncing around through a handful of raccoon papers. I mean, obviously they're the poster child for nest depredation, and
there's strong data showing them avoiding burned areas, recently burned areas.
Yeah, and most, so I dug through their food habits data, and most of the items that they would be consuming during the time of the year where they would be a nest predator are not going to be found commonly in uplands that are burned on a regular basis.
Yep.
This one will take a step back into more of a inspirational life path question. Charlie Merrill, 8687 on episode 3, How Could Season Frameworks Affect Wild Turkey Populations? Comments, both of you doctors do such a fantastic job with your beautiful research. I'm studying wildlife biology / ecology and much more and was wondering what your best advice would be for a student looking to pursue a dream in this amazing field. Also, might you docs have any information regarding the great, all caps, state of Illinois, which we already touched upon. Have a wonderful day, and please keep the podcast going. I'm getting a very nice education from you both. The wild turkey is my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's
and that's exciting.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I really enjoy these kind.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
that was
nice
us.
To know.
That was us 20 years ago.
Yep. And I had the same questions, and I was also, I mean, clearly, wild turkeys are an important part of my life. Yeah. So, well, do you want to start, Will, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think there are many paths to be successful. And, people get to where they're trying to go all kinds of different ways through this field. But, it sounds like they're already in college, I guess, but some of our other audience might be before that and they're trying to decide.
Did they say Southern Illinois is where they're based out of? Or
they
just
didn't
Illinois?
They just said.
And they just
what do we
asked
know
if you have information regarding the great state of Illinois. They didn't say if they're in Illinois.
So it could be Southern Illinois if they're in that wildlife program.
First and foremost, I immediately think of SIU Carbondale, good wildlife program. Yeah.
So there are a variety of good wildlife programs depending on where you are. And, I think there are some important things. First, pick a program that fits you well and your interest in what you want to do. And when you're in that program, get involved. I think that's a really critical component.
Can I back you up just a second? Because I think I want to add one point of clarity or clarification to what you just said. You said pick the right program, and that's very important. Because some programs you're going to, it sounds like, you're very much, your interests are very much aligned with mine and Marcus's in terms of like working with game species and turkey specifically. But you'll find that some programs are more oriented towards that versus some programs, and oftentimes they'll call themselves by a different name, like an ecology program or a conservation biology program, as opposed to like a wildlife management or a wildlife ecology and management program. So it sounds like what you're looking for is one of those that fits more into the latter category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And, I think that's important to take into consideration. And, one of the key differences is in one of those more management-oriented programs, the faculty as a whole are often more management or more applied.
Mm-hmm.
And, then you can get into other situations. Like I'm in a wildlife ecology program and I'm applied, but not all of my colleagues are.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have some of that everywhere too, though. Like people work on different things.
And that is good for the department to be working on a wide spectrum of issues and, look and see what kinds of classes and who the people are. And, I think that's important, but also getting involved. We have all ongoing research, all the other faculty do, and we constantly need help. And, getting involved in a lab that's doing the kind of work that you really want to know about is fairly easy to do, in my opinion. I think, it takes some work to figure out who that is, and then there's a good chance they're going to need help. And if you're, working hard to reach your goal, that's a good way to get your foot in the door. And then the same thing is true when if you decide to go on into graduate school and get more specialized. I mean, we advertise positions for master's positions all the time that are game species focused, and if you're starting early to get involved and get experience with those things with faculty, it's also a really tiny world. We all know each other, and that can get your foot into the door, and move you up the list in terms of candidates for these master's positions, and they're constantly coming available.
Yeah.
And Will and I talk about this a lot. You know, we are kind of turning a corner, I feel like, with interest in our particular discipline, you know, in terms of being, you know, the focus on turkeys and deer and quail, you know, game species, just in general, habitat management work. That is not as popular of a topic with the folks that are getting into these programs now.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think if you're interested in that, if you take that approach, you can be successful.
I would
And
agree.
you can you know, get into a state agency in a role, or a federal agency, or continue on like we did and end up in academia. And we, you know, we need those people. So it's nice
Good stuff.
to be
Yeah.
in demand.
Yeah, if I had to boil it down, I would say the two biggest things are number one, choose a reputable wildlife program, and number two, take advantage of as many paid and volunteer opportunities, particularly on research projects if you're thinking grad school, as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have the greatest amount of opportunity to volunteer and get those paid positions at a research university that, you know, has high research activity.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And just to paint a picture for people, I told my senior level habitat class this the other day. You know, I just hired another master's student, and I had several applications from students that had really good GPAs and multiple um, experiences as like a research technician on research projects. That, you know, those people didn't even make the interview round. And I say that not to diss or take anything away from them. It's just that is how competitive
Yeah.
this master's job market has become. I mean, you have so many students out there that have tons of experience and great grades. It's tough, but I don't want to discourage anybody. I want them to use that to inspire them to put their foot on the gas.
Yeah,
You know,
I see this a lot, and some students are coming by honest because they're trying to figure out what they want to do, but they have a wide variety of experiences,
right?
and I think there's some value to that for different reasons, especially if you're trying to figure out. But if you're coming into it and you know you want to work on turkeys, you can be very deliberate about that,
And there's lots
and
of turkey
see,
work going on around the country too to get
yeah,
involved in right now.
that's exactly right. We're hiring technicians at almost every institution that are paid technician positions.
I think I have two of those open right now.
Yeah, we're literally going to advertise like a dozen in
Yeah.
the next few
We
weeks.
could
You
link
know.
those in the show notes if you weren't, Will.
Yeah, so you better get them out, Will, because we're going to try to get all the talent.
Yeah.
But seriously, like, you can be deliberate and choose to apply to positions. They are available, and you know, the first step is to get involved in the lab at your institution that's doing that kind of work, and that often leads to those opportunities where you can secure them. And then if you do that, and then you know, if you're in Will's stack of applicants on some turkey project, and you have 2 or 3 turkey related experiences, then you're the top of the stack. And
There
that's
you
what
go.
you're trying to achieve. And especially if you were working in my lab to get those experiences, then Will's going to call me and ask me if you should be hired.
That
So
is a very
that's
important
where,
point. You need to know some professors. If you want to go to grad school, you need
yeah,
to know some professors because
yeah,
I'm sure you run in the same situation, Marcus, where a student graduates from your program and they may have a 4.0 GPA and they ask you for a reference, but if you haven't had a chance to interact with them as much, that diminishes your ability to give them a
yeah,
good recommendation.
that's right.
So get to know some professors, you know, that
Yeah,
that can provide those later on.
yeah, and be deliberate about that. You know, if you want to work on turkeys and there's somebody at your university working on turkeys, and then you apply to a turkey program somewhere else, those professors are going to know each other and they're going to talk about it. So, you know, I think that is a way, if you know how you want to go through the path, then be deliberate.
Cool.
Nice.
That one I think we're both passionate about. We're talking about the next generation of professionals.
They brought out the educators in us on that one.
Yeah.
A little touch of that passion there.
All right. So on episode 80, Managing Pine Rotations for Turkeys, Lisa Bell 4649 comments, no mention of straw production, ?
I have never seen a stand managed for straw production. Now, granted, I have not seen a ton of them. I've seen some.
I've seen a bunch of them.
And of the one, so you can speak to this too. That's good. Of the stands I've seen managed for straw production, none of them provide turkey habitat.
Yeah, I would say at best they could have some thermal cover.
Yeah,
but, you know,
those are just two objectives. Those are just two objectives that don't mesh well.
Yeah, and you might see turkeys, working their way through it, but structurally it's fairly poor, the insect production, and that's by design.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I don't want to diminish that opportunity for revenue for landowners because it's a really good one, especially in longleaf country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or slash pine. You know, people are diversifying their portfolio by adding that to it, and that is fine.
Yeah, but you have to have high canopy closure and a clean understory to efficiently rake straw.
Right, and you're going in and actively getting rid of the vegetation by intent.
Yeah.
So without that structure, it just unfortunately isn't. You know, that's the drawback or the cost.
Yeah. So if I've got acres that are allocated to that practice, then those are just not. You know, that's not my acres I'm managing for turkeys. I'm doing that somewhere else.
Yeah. So that's how I would deal with the situation. If you need the income, but you also want turkeys, then, you know, try to choose the layout the best you can so that you can have both, because they're not going to occur in the same space.
That's it. I really enjoyed having you on to ask these questions, Charlotte. It ran way smoother than our dumb ass trying to do it. And look, I gave you a gobble.
Oh yeah.
Yes, thank you. Just wait until our co-host episode.
She really wants us to lose our family-friendly rating. She's been asking us for gobbles. So, what the heck? There you go.
We're just too buttoned up and clean. We're just too buttoned up.
Well, before I hop off and before we end this episode, I did want to just do a shout out to a couple of our loyal listeners and people that are always commenting on our podcast episodes on YouTube. Shout out to XX Crazy Person. We appreciate all of your comments. I'm sorry I don't get to all of them, but just know that we're seeing everything that you're writing.
For the record, Charlotte does bring me comments regularly to answer questions, so it's not like I don't interact at all on there, but we've just been kind of overwhelmed with them.
These guys have like 2 or 3 things that they have to do for their job. They're a little busy.
Yeah, well, we sure appreciate all the help, Charlotte, and everybody out there for listening. But I also was going to say we should give something away to them.
And I have actually ended up being a newer comment, and it just happens to be a really great comment. But this was randomly generated.
All right, so we have a Florida brand camo hat to give away to whoever you've selected.
All right. So Garrett from MO gave us 5 stars, titling it Best Source for the Average Lover of the Wild Turkey. They comment, you don't actually love the wild turkey if you don't listen and learn from this show every week.
Whoa.
Wow.
A statement.
Man, that's a lot of pressure.
Them's fighting words, man.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, no, reach out to us and we'll make sure to get you that hat. But, I can't say enough how much I appreciate the audience. And Charlotte, we really appreciate you for doing this stuff and being flexible and jumping on here and letting us make an ass of ourselves. There's you another gobble.
Yeah. And I will say, if anyone is interested in science communication work, this job has been hands down the most rewarding of my career so far. I mean, you can tell how fun it is always learning, getting to work with these goofballs. It's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
We did just have a science communication position open. I hope y'all got your apps
That
in.
is true. Yeah, hopefully you got it in before it closed. And I do just want to also add one more comment from our Apple Podcast reviews. Holly Leaf Warriors commented for 100th podcast prize idea that Turkeys for Tomorrow should sell a limited edition call, a Marcus and Will signature call. You could then give several away to celebrate podcast milestones.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Just an idea.
Yeah.
Let us know if you're interested. wildturkeyscience@gmail.com. It's live. Send us your thoughts. Send us your ideas. Send us your criticisms, but hopefully constructive.
We spoke it into existence.
Yep.
Yeah.
Charlotte,
amazing how often that happens.
Charlotte, can you close us out with a negative review my head isn't so big?
Oh, man.
It just feels wrong to leave with feeling so optimistic.
Why would you do that to us, Will?
I'm just kidding. All right, we can call it there.
You might have to look a while.
That was a weak attempt at a joke. All right, let's close it out.
I remember someone called you guys buffoons, all caps.
Oh.
These guys are buffoons. And then I just kept scrolling because I didn't want to read this.
Well,
they're right.
No argument here. Yeah, I remember one calling us a bunch of rednecks or something trying to do science.
Yeah,
that's also accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, our mom and pop venture has taken off so much farther than I think any of us anticipated a year and a half ago.
We may be all those things. We may be all those things, and people may be surprised about this, but we don't lack self-awareness, so we know.
Yeah.
All right.
It was fun joining you guys. Thanks for having me on.
It was fun to have you on. We're going to have to do more of
fun.
these. I think people are really going to like this Q&A episode.
Yep,
Cool.
for sure. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University Podcast Network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.